All right, I'd like to call the meeting to order at 6:01 p.m. With the Pledge of Allegiance. So if we could stand and recite the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
to the
of the
flag
United
of the
States of
United States
America,
of America and
and
to
to
the
the
republic
republic
for which
for which it
which
stands,
stands
it stands, one
one
nation,
nation,
one nation,
under God,
under God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
with
with
liberty
with liberty
and
and justice.
justice for all. All right, thank you. Madam Secretary, if you could call the roll, please.
Sure. Mr. Carter? Mr. Robleski?
Present.
Mrs. Peasky?
present.
Ms. Martin here. Mr. Brooks? Mrs. Williams?
Here.
And Mrs. Washington.
Here. I just want to remind everybody, if you want to mute yourselves, you can, and then when you have a question or you need to talk, you can unmute. So it just kind of helps with some of the background extra noise. Well, you can unmute now because we'll need to do the mission for Baldwin Community Schools is to prepare students for the promise of tomorrow. And the purpose of the open board meeting, it says this meeting is a meeting of the Board of Education in public for the purpose of conducting the school district's business and is not to be considered a public community meeting. There is time for public participation during the meeting as indicated in the agenda. And we do have 2 communication items this evening. So moving on to consent agenda items. F, first is the approval of the agenda. Approval of the minutes of the regular meeting of April 21st, 2020. Approval of the bills to be paid. The general fund account check starting with 73917 to 73978. Food service account check starting with 5022 to 5024, and the Baldwin Promise Authority check 1295. Is there a motion that we approve the consent agenda items?
I make a motion we approve the consent agenda items.
It's been moved by Mr. Robleski.
I'll
Is there a second?
A second.
Second by Marianne Peasky. Any questions or comments? All in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Now we'll move on to presentations. So, Mrs. Wiersma, would you like to go first with any
Sure.
updates you have?
Good evening, everyone. Can give me a thumbs up if you
Good
can hear me.
evening.
Thumbs up? Great. So we meet as a staff once a week, usually on Monday mornings at about 8 o'clock. And I take my staff through just a couple of communication items, updates, because everything is so fluid right now. We are finishing our book study on Help for Billy, which is a book written by Heather Forbes, and it has to deal with social emotional learning. And we've just met as a curriculum team, and we've identified a new ELA curriculum. We are getting ready to gear up for next year with our positive behavior intervention support systems. So we're going to have a meeting scheduled within the next week. Special ed and our student assistant team are meeting regularly. And I just really want to once again get
Do we lose audio?
I can't hear. I can hear you.
Okay, we lost
Mrs.
her.
Mrs. Wiersma, I think we lost you. What I'll do, Ms. Wiersma, is I'll go on to Mr. Cornwell, and then when you reconnect, just let us know. Mr. Cornwell, are you available? Are you ready?
I am. Thank you. I hope everybody's doing well.
Yes.
The secondary, we also have our weekly staff meeting Monday afternoons. This week we actually had a little bit of technology training from Mr. Quinteros. He showed us a pretty cool tool called Go Formative, which a couple teachers have started using. The big news of the secondary, though, is graduation is this week. So I hope you'll be joining us on Thursday afternoon. We're going to do a grand tour of Lake County. We've got about 125 miles or so we're going to cover and go door to door to deliver diplomas and some other goodies to our graduating seniors. Other than that, the teachers of the secondary have done a nice job of making some adjustments on the fly based on student, ability to participate. And we actually have a team that we put together this week to start looking at some different tools to use in the future with our virtual learning. So, like I said, pretty brief at the secondary level.
Thank you. And packets went out because I got a packet today in the mail.
Yep, they were ready to go Thursday night to go to the mail Friday. So hopefully they're all at kids' homes now.
Awesome. Thank you for that update.
How many graduates?
We have 22 students that we're going to be meeting with on Thursday.
Nice.
The caps and gowns were picked up last week. I have one, I think I just learned this afternoon that I've got to deliver on Thursday morning. But other than that, I think we're ready to go.
Good.
Excellent. Mrs. Wiersma, were you able to reconnect?
As a good example of our connectivity problems, she texted me and told me that she's not able to get back on at this point. She'll keep trying.
Okay. Okay. All right. Thank you. So we're at our communication items. If there's anyone who has the ability to connect with us virtually, now is your opportunity to address the Board of Education if you so choose in the comment box. I see we have no comments at this time. There will be another communication item in the agenda later. So now I'll turn it over to Mr. Heitmeyer for our discussion items.
All right. Good evening once again. The first thing I want to talk about is preparing a budget for 2021. As I'm sure that you've read, there are severe cuts probably coming. There's a severe budget shortfall. So we don't know exactly what that looks like. We've heard lots of numbers bandied about at the state level, but we don't know where exactly cuts are going to come, whether they're going to hit some of the categoricals like 31A. So we're going to ask for some guidance tonight. We can weather the storm. We do have a good fund balance, so we're in good shape there. And because of some of the things we've been unable to do because of remote learning, we are going to have some carryover in our title funds as well. So we want to be able to prepare a budget for June, even though we probably aren't going to have much guidance from the state on what that looks like. Legally, we have to have a budget prepared by June 30th. So I'm going to defer to Mr. Forrester for a couple minutes to give you a little more information, and he's going to be asking you for some guidelines as we prepare this budget. So Mr. Forrester, I'm turning it over to you. Please remember to unmute.
Thank you, Mr. Heitmeyer. Yes, so obviously, just to restate or recap really quickly what Mr. Heitmeyer said, there's been a lot of discussion at the state level and among school districts and quite frankly, all municipalities about what the state budget is going to look like next year and where the cuts are going to come, because we all know that the revenue estimating conference was held and recently, and it doesn't look good obviously. The state has lost a significant portion of its revenues and is anticipating that to continue at least for the next couple of years as we continue to recover from COVID-19. So we've heard anything from, at first it was, there was discussion about the foundation allowance remaining flat. And then, more recently, I've been hearing ranges from, anywhere from $300 to $1,000, likely somewhere in the middle of that, depending on how the budget looks when the legislature and the governor put it together and approve it. So for us, we're an out of formula school district. We do not receive dollars for our general education students through the foundation allowance. So any cut that would occur would likely wouldn't impact us through the foundation allowance. So from that standpoint, we are, immune, so to speak, from budget cuts. As Mr. Heitmeyer, acknowledged, there are some categoricals that could impact us, however. At risk is one of them. If you recall, we used to get at-risk money, and then in 2007, we went out of formula, and the legislation for 31A indicates that if a district receives more local revenue than they are entitled to with the foundation allowance, then you forfeit your 31A dollars. So we did not receive those for a long period of time. We then were able to recover those dollars while Granholm was in office. And then when Governor Snyder came in, he actually changed that. He didn't want any legislation that favored districts, and certain districts. So a couple of years ago, they changed that legislation to include all at-risk students. And so now it doesn't matter necessarily if you're not a formula district, you receive those dollars anyway. So the short of it is that we receive about $111,000 per year. It would not surprise me if that went away. I know that it's a difficult thing to predict because the state also is acknowledging more and more that students who are at risk need more support, and they, the social emotional, aspects have been, in play a lot more. So while I think it's important to the state to preserve those dollars, I also think that it's going to be really tough. I mean, they're going to be looking at some tough times as they begin to build a budget for the 21 fiscal year. The other piece is the MIPSERS piece. We get about $50,000 in retirement help, essentially. So they're dollars that go into school districts to offset the rising costs of retirement for school employees. That's about $50,000. It would not surprise me if that went away as well. As I look through the rest of them, most of them are relatively small, and some of them can't go away. Our special education dollars are protected. They cannot be taken. There are mandates that the state has put forth that they have to pay us for because they're not supposed to issue unfunded mandates. So the short of it is that as I look through it right now, my analysis would be, best guess would be that we will lose approximately $160,000 in revenue next year. However, we also received a grant, a CARES grant, which is through, from the federal government. And that can be spent over a 2-year period, and it's $444,000. So those dollars over 2 years are likely to make up any shortfall we might have. So I don't anticipate us seeing much of a revenue reduction for fiscal year 21, which is the budget that we'll be presenting to you, at the June meeting. So we have collective bargaining agreements in place. We know exactly what those salaries are going to be to build the budget. The leadership team has been meeting to discuss staffing models and needs going into next school year. As Mr. Heitmeyer indicated, we have a large amount of title carryover. We have carryover in basically every program, Title I, Title II, Title IV, and Title V. And again, that is largely due to, to our inability to spend those dollars in particular in the last, quarter or third of the school year. So we're going to have, the dollars are restricted, obviously. So that creates a bit of a problem, coupled with the fact that when you're talking about spending hundreds of thousands of dollars, generally what we're doing to support our students is we're hiring people. We're hiring people to provide interventions for students beyond their basic education. And we have struggled recently finding individuals due to, the shortage of qualified applicants. That's another thing that we may find changes, at least in the short term, because if there are deep cuts in the state budget to public school districts, we will see, and we're already seeing, but we'll continue to see hiring freezes from other school districts. We'll probably see some layoffs, which is not good, but we might be able to help some folks out if they are laid off. We have had open positions and not been able to fill them. So these dollars, along with the 2 positions in the middle school that were not filled this year, could very well help us to fill those gaps that we've had over the past couple of years in staffing. So we think that we have a good plan and a good foundation to build the budget. The missing piece would be the non-union contracts. So we have non-union contracts that are set to expire on June 30th. And along with the budget, we're going to have to bring those contracts to the board for approval. What we are trying to determine is what is an appropriate method to an appropriate number percentage to apply to these contracts if we intend to give our non-union staff members an increase. So as we looked through the numbers and as we were building the budget, it occurred to us that based on the numbers, based on what's happened with our current collective bargaining agreements and the increases that we gave both the teachers and the support staff, that we're looking at possibly a 3% raise in some fashion. So it could be a 2% raise with a 1% bonus, a straight 3% raise. I mean, we really could do, we could do it however we wanted for those, non-union contracts. But I did want to solicit, comments from the board before we bring that information to you, so that we can have an idea of what the expectations of the board would be, because ultimately the Board of Education is approving these contracts. And we want to make sure that that you are all comfortable and are in agreement. So, and let me just provide one more piece of information. We have recently eliminated a position that had been intended to be eliminated for a couple of years. The savings from that position is approximately $117,000 per year. The total cost of the increases for the non-union contracts would be approximately $30,000. So if you look at it compared to last year, the non-union people would actually, we would as a school district actually be spending approximately $98,000 less annually on the non-union staff. So again, it costs approximately $30,000 to, and just so you know, that includes everything. That's not just salary. That would be the retirement that goes along with it. That's all the insurance increases. And we already have all that information. So that would be a total dollar amount for the increase for the next school year. So I don't know if anybody has any comments, and I'm not necessarily expecting everybody to comment or anybody to comment. But if anybody has something they'd like to say, I mean, please feel free to, say it now, or we can talk later, whatever people are most comfortable with.
Well, I hate to ask you this question because you may not have those numbers, but you were saying that we could do a 3% increase for the non-union staff. Is that 3%? Is that a $30,000 savings? Is that where that comes from? Or is that
So,
just
so with everything included, I mean, some of the numbers are fixed, right? So the insurance costs are going to go up no matter what. And so, those things are fixed. But from a simplistic standpoint, we could look at it and say, every percent is about $10,000. Now it's a little less than that. It's probably closer to $8,500. But every percent that we do is going to be approximately $10,000. So if you do 3%, it ends up costing an additional $30,000 for the non-union staff. But we are saving 117 per year with the position that no longer exists in that will no longer exist in 2021. So if you take the savings of 117 and then reduce that by the increased cost for the 3% of 30, that gives you a savings over our current year. So next year's savings would actually be $98,000. Now, again, that's a $30,000 cost increase, including insurance and pension, everything for the non-union staff.
okay? Thanks, Mr. Forrester.
You're welcome.
Are there any other questions for Mr. Forrester on that topic?
Hey, real quick, David, is that CARES money that we don't have to pay that back, do we?
We do not. No, we are
that's
able to spend that over a 2-year period. It was a distribution based on that all school districts got based on free and reduced lunch count, similar to the Title I formula. So it does have some restrictions, but it's significantly more flexible than Title I. So I was on a webinar recently, and they were going through some of the allowable uses, and one of them that I found very interesting was that if you were going to if you can use it to create new positions, right, under certain circumstances. So if we wanted, let me just throw something out there. If you wanted to, if the elementary wanted to have a behavior intervention specialist, that's something that would qualify under that money. But if we as a school were having financial difficulties and we lost our 31A money, which is our at-risk money, currently pays Mr. Fricke's salary. He's the secondary BIS. We actually could use those CARES dollars to retain him and pay his salary, even though we hadn't in the past. So it certainly provides us more flexibility. And again, it's 200. If you divide it up into 2 years, we could spend it all in 1 year, or we could split it up. But if you want to, like I said, if you want to retain those positions, you can. So those dollars, $222,000 a year averaged, will likely make up for any shortfall that we see. Our property tax values have gone up, so we'll actually receive additional operating dollars in the current year. I have read reports and information from Treasury, and they do not expect any short-term or long-term effects to property tax values based on what's happening. So I think do I have you all? I think the only,
I can hear you.
okay, I think the only risk that school districts run, in particular out of formula school districts, is that you may have some businesses that don't open back up as a result of this. Now, hopefully that doesn't happen, for us in Baldwin, but that would be one thing that could have an impact. But, again, the smaller businesses in our community do make up a pretty small portion. So even if that did happen, it wouldn't impact the dollars that we bring in very significantly. Our 10 biggest taxpayers, I think, make up 85% of our operating revenue, with GO being the largest, of course, making up about, I think, 17 or 18%.
Thanks, Mr. Forrester.
You're welcome.
Mr. Heitmeyer,
All
if
right,
there's
well,
no
with
other
the-
questions, let's keep going. Go ahead.
All right. With the combined efforts of our community, the school, and Baldwin Promise Authority, we are going to be able to have a graduation on Thursday afternoon. You are all invited to participate. We're going to leave about 2 p.m. and go on a long journey through Lake County and visit our graduates. It's going to be really exciting. I am making the recommendation that we don't wear our gowns because we're going to be getting in and out of cars frequently. So just dress really nice and look good, and we're going to celebrate the class of 2020. It's going to be a very exciting day. So if you for some reason can't make it, just please let me know so we know ahead of time. But I'm hoping you will all be there. Mr. Cornwell, is there anything you want to add at this point?
No, I think we have about 25 vehicles or so. Lake County Sheriff's going to offer an escort for us, and we have some fire department vehicles that are going to join us at different townships, as they're able. So it should be an interesting crowd going down the road, not stopping at places
Well,
and
that's pretty
gathering.
awesome. That's going to be pretty awesome. Does everybody know today, as far as the board members, if they're going to be able to attend on Thursday?
Yeah, I replied that I was able to. I don't know if you got that response, Mr. Cornwell.
I've heard from most of the board members, yes, that they'll be able to be there. I don't have the list in front of
Okay.
me, but
Awesome.
I'm not
Okay.
able. I'm not going to be able to attend. I am going to try to come in to go to Ariana's graduation, but I'm helping with Feeding America at St. Anne's and also doing the school food giveaway in the morning.
All right. Mr. Forrester, do you want to talk about the food service renewal?
Certainly. As some of you know, and some of you may not know, but the Michigan Department of Education and the United States Department of Agriculture control a lot of the food service aspects, or a lot of the aspects of the food service operations in school districts. So right now, the way that the USDA and MDE have this set up is that if you outsource your food service operation, you can outsource it for 5 years. Well, it's a 1-year contract with the option of 4 renewals. So you can do it for a total of 5 years. We are completing our 5th year currently with Chartwell's. So we have to reissue or issue a new RFP. I have completed the RFP. It has gone to MDE. It has been approved by the school nutrition program, and it will be released tomorrow. I sent an email to all of the required food service vendors. MDE actually has a list of vendors that information has to go to. And so far I have 2 responses. Two companies have requested the information, which I will say, this is the first time that we've had a second. So that's good. It creates competition. But in the past, we've only had one. Chartwell's has been the only company that has responded, and in part is because of the geography. I mean, we're sort of we're isolated. We're a bit, so it is. They can't draw upon some of the other, school districts that they have. But I just wanted to let you know that RFP is going to be issued tomorrow to at least 2 vendors, and then we will go through the process of having them bid based on the information that we provided. Once they have bid, then we have to fill out, it's called a bid point calculator. And once that information has been compiled, we will, take that to, we'll bring that to the board, and actually the board will approve one of the vendors, assuming that they both submit a proposal. So they could request an RFP, but not actually submit a proposal. I mean, that's something we need to keep in mind. But anyone who submits, then we will compile the information and bring it to the Board of Education.
All right, I will go on to item D. That is the West Shore ESD budget approval. This year, as you know, it was done very differently because we were unable to go over to their board meeting, but they did send out the documents and send out a video explaining the documents. You have those documents and the slides from the video in your packets. Basically, they have given an update on the services they've provided for the schools in the ESD, and they have provided a budget sheet that explains what their budget will be. They have some retirements, but they're planning to replace those retirements as well as add one additional position as well, and that is in your information. But I would encourage us to approve that budget on their behalf. Item E is school resource officer. This is another one of our third-party contracts. The idea of adding the school resource officer was that individual would be present at school, working with students and staff, and a visible part of the activities that go on at the school, including supervision or a presence at night events, sports competitions, dances, those kind of things. We have not utilized the services much since we've been on the stay-at-home order. The SRO has checked the building over on a regular basis and those types of things. I think Mr. Forrester has had some conversations with the Sheriff's Department, and I didn't know if there's anything you wanted to add, Mr. Forrester, or if that kind of sums it up.
I think it sums it up. I mean, so obviously we've had this discussion about our third-party contracts, in particular at the last board meeting, and we have been advised by our legal counsel that it is unconstitutional for a public entity to use taxpayer dollars to pay for a service that is not being rendered. So the SRO position is similar to the other third-party contracts that we've been looking at. I have spoken to the undersheriff on a couple of occasions, and essentially what we need to determine is if we want to utilize the school resource officer during this time. Because if we do not utilize the school resource officer in some capacity, then we would not be able to pay the county, essentially, a portion of the SRO's time that was allocated to the school. So the only other thing that I would like to add is that there was some concern that if that happened, that it may not be something that's sustainable. So, and again, it's for the Board of Education to decide. I just want to make sure you have that information. So what that means is that if the school district said, and this is not set in stone, but it was what was implied. If the school district said, hey, we're not going to utilize him, we haven't been utilizing him for the past 3 months, so we're not going to pay that bill, then there is a possibility that would go away. Because the county or the Sheriff's Department would have to pick up that piece of the contract, and we would run the risk of losing it. So that's a question that that we'll have to answer, is that how we want to handle that.
Any thoughts, board members?
what would you use him for? I mean, can you come up with it? Do you have any ideas as far as what he would be used for?
One thing that we've discussed is really taking a lead on the school safety type initiatives, but I don't know that that would necessarily be a full-time job. That's a get some of that stuff in line, but it wouldn't necessarily be full-time. But that is one thing that we've talked about that he would definitely be able to do.
And that's paperwork, correct?
Yeah, yeah.
And some of those checks that he's doing, like going to the school, is what something a regular road officer would do anyway, correct?
That's definitely a possibility.
And so during the summertime, when school is not in session, he wouldn't be a part of a payment anyway. Is that correct?
That is correct. He was,
Structure, David. I'm not
Yeah,
sure
it
the
was-
total structure.
yeah, it was only, the contract was only for student instructional days. So it was, and if you
Okay.
recall, it was 4 days a week. So it wasn't even 180. So, technically it would have ended, June 12th. I guess I'm trying
Right.
to remember off the top of my head, somewhere in that area. It would have ended on June 12th. But we're talking
Okay.
about,
So
so
what
we're
it's-
talking about from March 13th. So April, May,
Okay.
June. So approximately 3 months.
Okay. So what it sounds like is saying that between the sheriff department and the county, they don't have any funds to pay him unless we paid him. Is that kind of what that sounds like? That's what it sounds like to me.
That's
That's-
kind of what we're hearing.
Yeah, that's what I
Okay.
gathered. Now, it wasn't set in stone. It wasn't, there wasn't an ultimatum necessarily, like that. It wasn't anything like that. But the impression I got was that, the county and or the sheriff's department were not planning on that additional expense for this year. And if they in fact had to pay it, that it might be something that they looked at and said, we can't sustain this.
Okay.
So, yes.
We kind of knew that
Okay.
going in, right? Wasn't that the whole purpose for shared expense?
Correct.
Yeah, it's, yeah, I really don't, I don't know. I don't have.
You're muted, Mr.
Cut
Brooks.
out, Joe.
Yeah, I saw that. I muted myself right at the end of my sentence. Yeah, they must have had some type of contingency plan for when school ended. In order to keep him as a road officer. That means for 3 months, they're going to have to come up with an amount to pay. Has he been working during this time for the sheriff's department?
In some capacity, yes.
Some capacity? Okay.
Right.
All right. So it
So-
sounds, yeah. Go ahead, David.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, so, again, one of the things that the undersheriff did say to me was that if there was something that he could do, that
Mhm.
obviously they would make sure they met the minimum number of days over the summer. Now, again, the question is, do you want, is that really what we wanted? Do we want him over the summer? We're not going to, have any students, obviously, in particular this summer. We're not going to have any students in our buildings.
Right.
But they did say they'd be willing to make sure that he hit that number of days, even if he had to work for us over the summer in some capacity.
Yeah. I don't know what we could use him for. Summer school. Would he have been working during summer school?
No.
No?
No.
No? Okay. All right. So
David,
Mhm.
have we been paying him up to this point?
We have not made a payment. So we made a first payment. We have not made the second payment.
Okay.
Yeah, this just feels, just to me, it just seems like it falls right under our other third-party contracted employees that says if you can't use taxpayer dollars to render services that are not being rendered, if there's no students, then all of our other third-party contract people, aren't going to be able to work. And I understand the courthouse and the county and maybe the sheriff department's dilemma of maybe not being able to pay him, but I don't think that falls upon the school district's responsibility as part of our agreement with the contract. We pay you for what you do with students, and if there aren't any students, then I don't see how, we would, in good conscience and with some integrity, be able to pay someone for services not rendered.
Right. Is that the feeling? I mean, it's just an unfortunate situation. No one could foresee this, so there really shouldn't be an issue. I mean, you've got people all over the country who were not working because of an unforeseen issue. And it seems like this just falls under that category. He was cut off 3 months before his time date, and it's no different than any other private citizen or anyone else out there who does not have employment at this point in time. And you're right, Madam President, it shouldn't fall on the school. It really, I don't even think we have to worry about it or think about it. It is what it is. I mean, unless you have something, that pertains to his expertise, then it's just an unfortunate incident.
Yeah, and I mean, the extent to which we have to worry about it is just that we have a contract with the county for this service that essentially we would have to prorate. And again, if, there is a chance that if we prorate that we won't have a school resource officer in our buildings for the 2021 year. So again, that's up to, the Board of Education to determine. I just wanted to make sure that, you had all the information. That's a worst case scenario. I don't know that that's going to happen. That hasn't, been said directly to me. But again, just to make sure that you understand, what that could mean.
And hopefully that wouldn't be the case, but it was a long negotiation in the beginning. So
Yes, it was. Yeah. I mean, but in the direction that we're going with the social emotional learning, with the idea of providing more positive student supports with social workers and other things, and really engaging in our restorative practices, some of the, I don't want to call it behaviors, but some of the tasks of the school resource officers was more punitive than they were restorative, which kind of goes against the philosophy that we're trying to move forward. And, in my opinion, honestly, today with this discussion, I would feel okay if that did not occur in the fall, if we were to start back up in the fall, because I think we have so many other resources available to us that will probably better suit our kids than the punitive measures that sometime have been taken with the school resource officer.
Are you saying not to have a school resource officer? Or are you saying change the venue?
No, I'm saying that if the other side of our contract people, which is the court and I shouldn't say the court, the county and the sheriff department, says because we prorate or we're not able to pay him, if they say, well, he won't be available in the fall, I'm saying I'm okay with that.
I just want to make sure that we're all, that we all understand, like David said, that if we're not able to pay him for practice, that we do know that he may not come back in the fall. And if there is something that he can do, let's use him. But again, what would that be? Is there any way he could do like home visits or anything? Go check on the kids, just as a measure?
In my conversation, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I would say that if we were down the road and had really worked on what that role should look like, I would say that home visits might be appropriate. I would say, however, right now at this point, I don't think that would be an avenue to explore. Go ahead, David.
I was just gonna respond to Mrs. Peasky and say that, you know, the undersheriff has communicated to me that they are willing to have him do whatever we want. I think the issue is, do we have something for him to do? Do we have, you know, so the sheriff's department is willing to have him do, you know, whatever we need him to do. The question is, do we have anything for him to do? I think that Mr. Heitmeyer had mentioned the safety, you know, picking up the safety plan and working on that. But obviously this is a little different than the contract that we signed. And, you know, again, the question for, you know, that the board is going to have to answer is, do you want us to find something for him to do and, you know, and continue with this third party contract? Or do you want to say, you know, to the county, look, we don't, you know, we really, the spirit of this contract was that he was going to be in our buildings, you know, with our kids and with our staff. And because he can't perform those activities, we can't pay for services that's not being rendered, knowing in the back of our minds that if that is the course, that there's a possibility, a possibility that it wouldn't happen in 2020 or 2021. Sorry. So that's really, you know, the short of it.
I would just be concerned that we might be setting a precedent with working something out with this particular contract. I mean, the other third-party contracts, have you worked out some kind of scenario for those folks? Right now, we're not utilizing this gentleman's services, and I mean, my own personal opinion, there's no need to continue on. I know that the contract issue is the issue, I think is the only real issue that we're really discussing here, but have we made concessions for those other third-party contracts like we're making for this particular one?
So we have where it makes sense and where we can utilize people. So, you know, we have some Axiom employees who are still working because we have employees who have been in the building from time to time making student packets. You know, there are still bills that need to be paid and those kinds of things. So those employees have been continuing to clean and sanitize. We have some Chartwell's employees who are distributing food. But you know, one example of a vendor that we're not utilizing anymore is EduStaff. And Mr. Cornwell, Mrs. Wiersma, and Mr. Heitmeyer and I had that conversation initially to say, okay, do we have something for our EduStaff employees to do? And the consensus really was that, you know, the everyday subs, I mean, teachers have their classrooms, in particular in the elementary, and those teachers are communicating with their students. So, you know, there wasn't really a place on short notice where we were developing a plan from scratch. Basically, there wasn't really a place for those people. So we have made accommodations where it makes sense, and we've utilized people where it makes sense. You know, I guess the question is, does it make sense here?
Okay. Because the real concern is making sure that we secure this person or this contract for the next school year. And we're afraid that that may not happen if we cancel it right now.
If it's the desire of the board to continue this contract into 2021, I think the safest way to do that is to, again, you know, I can't guarantee that we can work something out, but to try to work something out. If it's a situation like we've been discussing and it's, well, you know, we've been moving in a different direction, we're not sure that this fits anyway. We also do have, I mean, I know that there are other considerations here, but we also have some, you know, there are some clauses, some language in the contract that would allow us to move in a different direction anyway. So if we're not as concerned about 2021 and we don't have that much for the resource officer to do, then we should probably be looking at prorating the contract and letting them know that you know, we don't intend to pay for the time period when the resource officer was not working directly for the school district.
Now, when you say different direction,
Okay,
what are you saying? David, can you hear me?
I'm sorry,
Go
did I
ahead, Ms.
miss?
Brooks.
Yes, when you say different direction, going in a different direction, will you define that?
Well, I guess I was just sort of piggybacking off earlier comments. I mean, if
Yeah.
if the board, I mean, I guess this is how I would say it. If the Board of Education definitely wants to have a school resource officer in the 2021 school year, then I think that not paying this portion of the contract jeopardizes that. If
And
it's a
two,
situation,
and
oh, go ahead.
No, go finish. What I was gonna say was to kind of support what you were saying, because I think you're kind of piggybacking off of one of the statements that I had made, and I didn't want to kind of leave you out there to kind of decipher what I was saying. If those of us who were here in the beginning when we first started having conversation about a school resource officer, we had a concept of what a resource officer would do, kind of a framework for that. That really has never materialized actually into what we really wanted this position to be. Like Mr. Heitmeyer said, there was a lot of negotiation, a lot of back and forth, and this is just my opinion because I was there, kind of settled in the negotiation to accept what we got. But that is not the original, the current duties is not what we really envisioned, and we have not really, it has not materialized and manifest what we really wanted that position to do. So when I made the statement of I was okay because we have yet in this time from March to when school ended, seeing what the original concept of what this resource officer was going to do. Has he done some great things? Has his position done some great things? It has, but it has done some things that aren't really aligning to where we're trying to go when it comes to the social emotional learning of students and some of the other supports that we're trying to provide. That's a long answer, Joe, but that's kind of what I was trying to get at.
Well, I understand that. I remember when Mr. Simmons was here that there was another reason why it was for the safety of our students as well. So I'd rather not throw the baby out with the bathwater. I think we have to draw up that narrative, Madam President, of what we want our safety officer to do. I don't think we can rely on him to fulfill those functions. I think now might be a time for education, and maybe we can redefine that, use this time of peace to maybe put him in another direction, unless he's not the right individual. I mean, if that's what you're talking, that he don't have the background to do to fulfill that narrative, then that's something else we can work out. But we're going to have to develop our own plan, and I don't know if it's because of limited resources that we're not able to fulfill that plan, and we have to just take what we get, or but I don't not want to have a resource officer just because of this situation. Right now, we're in a weird time, and we don't have to worry about student safety. But there comes a time when school's back in session that all that will, that'll be over with. And all it takes is one incident for that to happen. One angry student, one angry parent, whatever the case may be, and we defeated the whole purpose. So if we need to talk to the Sheriff's Department about figuring something out that's different in the future and what we're really looking for, then we need to put together a plan to achieve that. We don't have to settle, but at the same time, it was multiple reasons why we needed a resource officer. So that's where I am on the situation. I would hate to just forget about the program and then try to pick it up later, especially after all the work we've been through. But at the same time, what would you do with this individual? Is there any way that we can, I don't know, what do you do with teachers that don't quite fit the bill? You either let them go, or do you continue to try to educate them so that they'll be better to improve? And you know, when they don't, or if they don't, then that's a time when you sometime have to say goodbye. Professional
Yeah,
development.
it's a lot easier. It is a lot easier when they are your employee. My understanding is that there has been conversation with the department about some of the things that we desire. And my understanding is that he is a police officer first, and he will have that type of approach to all situations as it relates to students, whether it's inside the school building or or outside the school building. And he wasn't the original employee that they did have in mind when we first started the journey. So so there's a lots of stuff that we probably do need to, you know, be able to talk
Okay.
about and be able to sit down and talk with our that side of our contract to see what some of the
Right,
things we can come
right.
together and agree upon. So I
Yeah.
do agree
Well, we
with
need to
that.
be, yeah, well, we do need to be honest, you
And
know?
it's a complex issue. It's not
Yeah.
just this part of it.
No, no, what I'm saying is, you know, there's been a lot said tonight that I had no idea. So, you know, we need to be honest. Everything that we see that could be a potential roadblock for us moving forward, or if it's going to be an issue as far as the safety of our children, then we need to specify that. You know, we're the board. We've got that control. And if it's not working for us, then find something that does work.
David, did we have to make a decision tonight, or can we take another month?
Well, I think it gets a little tricky because I think the more time that passes, obviously, the less time there is to make up. So, you know, he hasn't been working 4 days a week for 3 months, and then if we get into June, I don't think that. I mean, we could continue to explore it. I mean, it certainly is not, you know, it's not my intention to put the board members in a position where you have to make a decision like this right now. I don't think that's fair. But you know, we can continue to have conversations internally, and then you know, we can maybe give people some time to think about it, and then you know, Mr. Heitmeyer can figure out if we need to reconvene at some point, or unless somebody has a different idea. I mean, I guess I shouldn't maybe have said that. It's not really my decision to make, but I didn't want to put extra pressure on board members. Certainly, that was not my intention.
But the question today is, do we pay someone for services not rendered? That's the question on the table today. Correct?
Yes, correct. We either have to,
Yeah.
we either have to stop paying or he has to start working, basically.
And we don't know what start working means or what that looks like because we don't have anything developed that we could say, yes, he could start working on Monday and continue to be paid. Correct?
Yeah, I mean, I think the best option at this point really is the safety plan. I don't know if Mr. Heitmeyer has any additional thoughts.
I mean, we're
Yeah. I mean,
we're
a couple
2
hours
months
a day.
in. We're 2 months in, and if we say the total thing would be not 32 days but 48 days, there's no way that we have 48 days of work. You know, we might have 15 days of work or something like that, and maybe we work that out with the county. There is some things, but there's not that many days of work. I mean, the idea behind the position is be at school for the kids, for the staff, you know, those type of things, and that's not feasible right now.
David, how much money are we actually talking about here?
I would estimate it's around $20,000.
Okay.
So, you know, the value of the contract is $45,000 per year. It was probably a little over half of the year, so somewhere between $20,000 and $22,000.
Okay.
All right. Would you like me to go on to item F?
Please.
All right. Chromebook quotes are within your packet. Let me give you a little background on this. We we've been looking at our Chromebooks closely since this began to try to determine how to distribute some Chromebooks to our students who needed them. And we've given out a little over 100 right now. Most of those have been what's called deprovisioned. Google has a system where they have a 5-year window when they will provide updates and warranties and those kind of things. But after the 5-year window, they no longer provide updates to those Chromebooks. Now, what that means for us as a school is if we use Chromebooks for testing, either NWEA or MSTEP, and they are no longer updated by Google, they may not be updatable by the annual tests that are given either through NWEA or MSTEP, because they have updates to their software and programs as well. So those become deprovisioned after a time. They still work, they're still good machines, but they can't be updated anymore. So we have begun to give out deprovisioned Chromebooks to our students. Now, then we said, okay, we've got 500 students. Is now the time to really begin to look to go to a one-to-one option? We are going to explore that with ETA, the company that we work with for tech services, at a meeting early next week. But we have a lot of Chromebooks, and we could get a lot of Chromebooks into students' hands, but we can replace those Chromebooks with brand new Chromebooks that would be top of the line and be able to fit right into our system. The one downfall to that is if we buy 300 new Chromebooks at one time, in 5 years, are we going to have to buy 300 new Chromebooks again? Generally, we're on a cycle where we buy 40 or so each year. That's the one drawback. The one really cool thing about what we're looking at with these Chromebooks is we could use 21H money. That's a grant that we wrote for to the state. It was originally written for a position, and then we rewrote it to pay for Kagan and stipends that we were going to do this summer. However, because we're not going to be able to have people at the school, we're going to hold off on the Kagan so we can use that 21H money to purchase those computers. It's about $78,000. And with that CARES money that Mr. Forrester talked about, we could decide down the road if we can fit it in, say, a year from now, we could use that money to pay for the Kagan. Again, that would be grant money as well, so none of it would be coming out of general fund. Traditionally, we pay for our Chromebooks and technology through the general fund, but this is a great opportunity to use the 21H funds. The reason that MDE allowed us to use the 21H funds in this way is because of the pandemic, and we wrote the revision to say we've got to look at ways to help with remote learning. This is one way to do that. This does not solve our connectivity problem. We're still trying to work on that and figure out how that works. But you have 2 Chromebook quotes in your packet, and we are recommending the one, let me see what the name is. I know what one we're not recommending. Trinity 3. I wanted to say Triton, but Trinity 3 Technology, and you do have that in your packet. They have worked with ETA in the past, but when you look at their proposal, it's much cleaner and easier to understand, and their warranty and ability to get stuff repaired is a lot smoother than CDWG, the other one. So that is my spiel on that. If you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
So just to clarify again, you are, you're saying Trinity 3 was a more challenging to work with?
No, they're the one we want to go with. They're
Okay.
great to work with, and if you look at their proposal, it's much cleaner.
Okay.
Less confusion there. And whenever you have a quote with confusion, you end up with confusion. Right, Mr. Forrester?
Is 300
Okay.
like, that'll be enough for the students that would need them at
Yeah.
any certain time?
Yes, we would be able to replace other computers and get more computers in our students' hands. We are planning, and I'll talk about this in a few minutes, but we're planning for a few different scenarios that may happen. Regardless of what happens in the fall, we are going to work down the process of going one-to-one with our students and getting devices in their hands regularly.
Are there any questions on any of the discussion items before we move on to communications? Okay, we'll move on to communications. This is our last one for the evening. So if there's anyone out in virtual land that has been engaging with our meeting, now is your opportunity to address the Board of Education. Thank you, Trent. There are no comments, so we will move right along. So under the action items, food service renewal budget is not an action item. So what we'll take, we'll just move everyone will be up. So WESD budget approval will be A, school resource officer would be B, and the Chromebook quotes would be C. So is there a motion to approve the WSESD budget approval?
I'll make a motion that we approve the WSES budget approval.
It's been motioned by Mr. Robleski, and it's been seconded by Mr. Brooks.
Yes. Yes.
Is there any questions or comments to that motion? Madam Secretary, can we get a roll call vote, please?
Sure. Mr. Robleski,
Yes.
Mrs. Peasky,
Yes.
Mary, yes. Mr. Brooks,
Yes.
Mrs. Williams,
Yes.
and Mrs. Washington.
Aye. Thank you. Motion carried. So the topic of the resource officer. So the topic at hand is to prorate payment. I'm gonna need a little bit of guidance on here to make sure that we're forming this action item, make sure that's correct.
I would say, this is my thought, Mr. Forrester, correct me if you think I'm wrong. Prorate the payment for the school resource officer based on services rendered, which allows us that window to say, here's some things we think that you could complete.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Yep.
Okay, awesome. So is there a motion to prorate the payment on the school resource officer?
I make a motion that we prorate the contract of the student resource officer for services rendered.
It's been motioned by Mr. Brooks. Is there a second or support?
I'll second.
And second by Mrs. Peasky. Is there any questions or comments to the motion?
And again, just for clarification, if we do find some stuff for him to do, that is what that services rendered would cover, right? He would be able to see if there's something we could have him do. Okay.
Yes.
Correct.
Thank you.
Correct. You're welcome. Any other questions or comments to the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed?
No.
Can you state your name so we'll make sure that, so that was Ms. Williams.
Yep. Lisa Williams.
So one nay. Motion carried. So action item D for Chromebook quotes. There were two before us. The recommendation is Trinity 3 Technology. So is there a motion to accept Trinity 3 Technology Chromebook quote?
I make a motion that we accept the Trinity Free Technology quote for a Chromebook.
It's been motioned by Mr. Robleski,
I'll second it.
seconded by Ms. Martin. Are any questions or comments to the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Those opposed? No opposers, motion carried. Before we go to superintendent items, Mrs. Wiersma, I know you've been waiting patiently and I appreciate that. So if you would like to finish your report, we will gladly like to receive your updates.
Sorry about that. You wouldn't.
That's
believe that
okay.
I live a block away from our internet, and there are developing countries with better internet than me. So that being said, I just did want to let the board know that we did do a virtual kindergarten roundup. Unfortunately, like a lot of the virtual things that are taking place in our school right now, we did not get a lot of response. So we're going to make some personal phone calls and do some recruiting. But other than that, I think that I touched on enough that our staff is staying very closely connected. They're meeting all of their expectations and working hard and providing great learning opportunities, both through their learning packets that we sent home, as well as the online two-way remote learning. So just a shout out to them and the few that are participating. I would be open to answer any questions any of you might have. Okay.
Are there any questions? Nope. All right. Well, thank you, Mrs. Wiersma, and thank you, Mr. Cornwell, for your updates tonight. And please share with your staff that we appreciate all the distant educational learning opportunities that they're providing to the students. We truly appreciate that. Superintendent items.
Well, I only have one item, and it's a big item. I want to thank everybody again, thank our staff, thank our community, thank the board members for your patience through this process. I know that many people want answers, and you know, some days they seem to change from day to day. You think you know something one day, and it changes the next day. As of last Friday, I would have said there was no way that we would be back with in-person education by August. I would have thought there was no way. And then over the weekend, the numbers suddenly went way down, including down in the southeastern part of the state. And Monday morning, it's decided that regions 6 and 8 can open up. And, you know, it just truly blew my mind. I wasn't expecting it. When I read through the governor's information on reopening, safe reopening, including the 6-point chart, you know, I just thought there's no way that by August or September, we are going to meet those metrics. You know, there's some timelines in there and how long we don't have a increase in all of these things. And then yesterday happened, and I was convinced, okay, they're ramping up to make sure we're back in school. So then we had a session with Dr. Rice this morning, and walking away from that session, I am not convinced that we are going to open up. So we had a 2.5 hour or 2 hour and 45 minute leadership meeting this afternoon. And I'm not kidding you when I tell you it seemed like it lasted 20 minutes. We covered a ton of ground. We are going to do another survey of our families, taking the original survey information and trying to dig a little bit deeper. We want to find out just exactly what maybe means as far as internet and devices. And we also want to find out, what does it mean to you to have a time of day for your kids to learn? Try to develop an idea of how we could plan to get more kids to be able to participate in instruction. So that was just a part of what we talked about. So we are going to work to develop scenarios. One scenario is we're back to school. But what does that look like? That's going to take some special planning. Another is that we're back to school, but we're also remote at the same time. And that might mean that half the kids come in on Monday and Thursday, and the other half come on Tuesday and Friday, and Wednesday is a learn at home day and a catch up day for kids who really need it, or something like that. Another option we're going to work toward is remote only. We know that we have tried really hard, we've worked hard, we've communicated, but we know that what we have in place right now as far as day-to-day remote learning is not going to continue to work necessarily in the future. We've got to figure out a way to measure attendance, measure participation a little bit clearer, have some accountability. I imagine that in the future, if we have remote learning, that a credit, no credit option is probably not going to necessarily be on the table. So we have those three options that we're really looking at, and we're going to develop plans for those. So when the state tells us what it's going to be, we're well down the road and we're prepared to enact that plan. Now, Mrs. Washington sent some information to me today about the West Bloomfield Schools plan. An interesting component in there that I hadn't really thought about is, what about the families who choose remote learning even if we are back to school? That's a whole nother piece of the puzzle that this may be working for some families, or they may not want to send them back just because of worries about another outbreak. So we have a lot of options on the table. We're looking in a lot of different ways and looking for resources. There's some researchers from MyExcel who are going to help us put together that follow-up survey, and we're going to be able to do it through SurveyMonkey, and then they're going to be able to make the data really usable for us. Having said all that, we are also at the same time trying to figure out what a summer school plan looks like, because we'd really like to offer summer school. It would have to be remote. Our numbers have gone down, so we're not sure that once it gets 70 degrees every day that we would be able to have that captive audience. Because with summer school, when the bus shows up at your house, you get on the bus and you come into summer school. But if there's not that prompt, they may not decide to log in. So these are some of the different things we're looking at. I don't know what it's going to look like, but we're going to make sure that we're doing the work so we are prepared for whatever it looks like. So that's a little spiel on what thoughts might look like for the fall, and I'm sure it's as clear as mud. But we know that there's going to be education. We just don't know 100% what it's going to look like.
Have you given any thought, when we talk about the internet capabilities and having that 21H money, and then having the CARES Act relief money to purchase those little jet packs, mobile hotspots, that you can basically use anywhere to kind of help families with some of the internet issues?
We have thought about that, and that's one thing that we're hoping to be able to discover through the survey is if you don't have cell phone service at home, then the jetpacks probably won't work. So we've got to get a picture of what kind of coverage we do have out there to know what we might be able to do. At one point, the jetpacks were on back order for a while, and I don't know if we know an update on that, but that's one thing we thought about. We've also talked to Cass Air, who brought in the fiber last summer and who we work with. They think they're probably about 9 months out at this point on being able to come up with some systems that can direct the satellite right to houses. But we can reach out to them and see if there's, you know, a limited thing we can do or something like that. But yeah, that's definitely on our radar because we know that's a huge need. And I also, based on what I heard from Dr. Rice today, I think that's probably going to become a state thing, if not a federal thing, because one thing that has become very clear out of this process is that there's a severe discrepancy between who has good internet and who doesn't have. And there's a lot of the state that does not have good internet.
True. Okay, thanks. I was just thinking about that. Thanks. Any other questions for Mr. Heitmeyer? Okay. Well, someone's phone is dinging. I'll do my comments last. So if there are any board member comments, you can go at this time.
Stop.
Is that you, Mr. Heitmeyer? Is that you
Put
digging?
it up on my computer. Trying to figure it out.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought it was someone's phone. Well, I just want to
My
say,
phone on the computer.
if no other board members have comments, I just want to say on behalf of the board, Mr. Heitmeyer, we want to, give our condolences to you and the passing of your mother. We did get you a card off in the mail a little late, but you should get it sometime this week. So just
Thank
want you
you.
to know that, you and Lori and the rest of your family continue to stay in our thoughts and our prayers. And it's a challenging time, and we're here with you. And we just want to continue to encourage you you're doing such a great job during this pandemic and trying to get all this stuff organized and working with the building principals and working with the administrative staff and our community partners, and just making sure that families are just getting what they need. And it's truly appreciated. And I wanted to make sure that you heard those words today.
Thank you.
You're welcome. We appreciate you. If there aren't any other board comments, I'm gonna say is it safe?
I had comments. I couldn't get off of mute, for goodness sakes.
I'm sorry. Mr. Brooks, go right ahead, sir.
That was probably my bell going bing, 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 bing. Hey, Mr. Heitmeyer, this, I think a lot of parents are afraid of homeschooling, but this might be an alternative for those who are thinking about keeping their children home. What would that look like? Would there be a camera in the classroom, or would someone be hired to work with that student one-on-one, or how would that look?
Those are some things we'll probably talk through. We have another planning meeting next Tuesday. I can't give a definitive answer on what that looks like. We have talked through a lot of different scenarios about remote learning, about flipping the classroom. We've looked at a lot of different things. So, that might be one possibility, is something like a camera or recording. But, I don't know what that looks like yet. That's until Mrs. Washington sent that document today and I read through it, I hadn't really thought about the family who says, you know what, we're going to stay at home. So, okay, yeah, well, we're going to educate you the best we can. What does this look like? So it opens up a whole new thought process there, for sure.
How about students that are disciplined? Would they have that capability too if the schools or the districts do go to something like that?
That's one thing we talked about way back when we first started putting together our original COLP, whatever that stands for. When we first started putting that together, one of the side conversations we had was, you know what, this might work really well for suspended kids if we have them log in and make sure they're there. So that's another avenue that we might be able to explore down the road. So this, there's definitely some bad things that have occurred because of the pandemic, but I also think that we have some opportunities to learn as educators from it, and we need to take advantage of some of the things that our eyes have been open to.
Right. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Brooks. Well, if there aren't any more comments, I'm pretty sure we're probably planning to meet this way next month for our June meeting.
I am anticipating at least one more meeting like this.
Okay, well, we'll just be in the mind frame that we'll be in another meeting like this in June. And if there aren't any more items, I'm going to entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting at 7:27 p.m.
I make a motion that we adjourn the meeting at 7:20 p.m.
Support.
It's been motioned by Mr. Brooks, supported by Mr. Robleski. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed leaving at 7:27?
No. Guess we'll see everyone
Okay,
tomorrow.
all right.
For Thursday.
See you Tuesday, everybody.
Yes. Yeah, don't forget 2:00. So if we could show up at 1:45. So